Welcome to the Tech Trailblazers Judges on Fire podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Teresa Cottam from Omnisperience, who's been one of our judges in the mobile category since the beginning. Good morning, Teresa.
Good morning, Rose, and good morning to your listeners.
Brilliant. Well, it's great that you've been able to join us. And obviously, we've known each other since the beginning. I was going to say the beginning of time, but that's not actually true. Since the beginning of the Tech Trailblazers. So could you give the audience a brief history of who you are, including some of perhaps your proudest achievements?
Oh, crikey, that's a tall order, Rose.
I know the brief bit's a bit hard.
I'm a telecoms industry analyst, and I've spent most of my career as an analyst. I began working for Cottam, as it was then known. It's now part of Informa Telecoms Group, but it was Cottam back in the day. And then I had a brief interlude working for a .com, if you remember what those are, everybody. But it was basically a startup. So I have had experience of working for a startup myself, and then went back to be an industry analyst, working for a company called Chorleywood. We were then acquired by Informa, so all roads lead to Informa. And then I worked for Analyst Mason, and after that I set up my own analyst firm, largely because I wanted to, I suppose, go off-piste a little bit and analyse things in a slightly different way from the methodologies that some of the big analyst houses use. So that's been a lot of fun. Initially, our firm was called Experience, and then we rebranded a few years ago and we became Omnisperience, which is what we are today. And we cover the telecoms space, particularly the telecoms B2B space. So we look at lots of different vertical markets and help telecoms operators understand what those customers might need. And in terms of achievements, I don't know. I suppose I published quite a few things I'm quite proud of. I'm a judge for the GLOMO Awards, the Global Mobile Awards that GSMA run every year, which is quite interesting and sits alongside the work that I do with you, Rose. That's quite an interesting awards to do. And I suppose my greatest achievement is I wrote a book, which I'm hoping to get. It's going to be published soon. And probably my knitting, I think. I'm really into my knitting.
Is that lockdown knitting or is that already in situ knitting?
Well, I do what I call stress knitting. So when, some people go and meditate and whatever, and I just knit. So I think I knitted 20 hats during lockdown. So, yeah, quite productive.
So you're ready for winter then? And
I am indeed, and so are all my friends.
A bit of a spoiler for Christmas presents, I think, that.
Yeah, they know what they're getting this year.
Excellent. So obviously you've talked a bit about your area of expertise. What are you seeing that's hot in the market?
In the telecoms market, things tend to be quite cyclical. And at the moment, we're just at the stage where we're building out the next generation of networks. So that's both 5G, which is coming to market at the moment, and fibre to the premises or to the home, so full fibre networks. And what this is going to deliver is massive amounts of capacity. And everyone's super excited about that. But as usual in telecoms, it's reached that point of the cycle where we also need to think about how we monetize it. And unfortunately, and somewhat disappointingly, every time we roll out new networks, we forget about this important fact until almost at the end. We have a sort of build it and they will come mindset, and it's not really good enough. We have to think about, our customers and what they actually need and want, and how we can, by meeting their needs, then actually increase our own revenues. That's really, really important. So at the moment, we're doing quite a lot of work at Omnisperience in terms of helping telecoms operators to understand their customers and what their customers need. And that's both on the sort of pricing, packaging, billing side, and also on, the customer experience side, which is, the kind of experience that you want to deliver, what that next generation's experience should be like.
Very interesting that you should mention that, actually. I've just done a podcast for Tech Britannia with Dr. Ranald Scarborough, who's doing the project to connect Polynesian islands to fibre. So they've just been laying cable out to LA and back to Australia.
Yeah, and I think, it is revolutionary. I mean, one of the fun things about being in the telecoms industry is that from when I first started to now, I mean, every single year there's something new happening, and you certainly can't sit on your laurels. You are learning all the time, and almost what you knew 5 years ago is now obsolete. So you can't stand still. Nothing stands still. But I think for me, some people really get excited about the technology itself, and that, there's a lot to get excited about. But for me, I'm really more excited about what it does for people and for economies as well. And how, when you look at the world and you think about those of us that can remember 20, 25 years ago, we think about what the world was like. We tend to forget, that, there was a time at which very few people had mobile phones. And now everybody's got these incredibly powerful little computers in their pockets. And even in developing countries, everyone is buying mobiles, even if they are lower spec mobiles, cheaper mobiles, and it's connecting them to the world, to the internet, and transforming their lives as a result. It connects them to education, it connects them to work, it connects them to things like healthcare. So it's had an incredible effect, on people all around the world. And I think that's something that our industry is justifiably proud of. And I think it's one of the great things about working in this industry is seeing how it transforms people's lives.
And I think particularly at the moment, I think we're definitely seeing that, life would have been very different for people going through the pandemic.
I mean, sure. I mean, how would we have managed this if we didn't have the cloud and if we didn't have mobile phones and we didn't have broadband? I mean, if we think about, perhaps when we were all a lot younger and these things weren't there, we can't imagine how we'd have managed. In fact, for most people, although there may have been some initial challenges, we did manage to keep going. And, you really do thank goodness for those cloud apps and the fact that, although the connectivity might not be as fantastic as we would dream of, it did keep us connected and it did keep going. So, we have been quite lucky in a lot of ways, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the likes of Zoom and other video conferencing applications have been great for keeping people connected who would normally spend time face to face, and perhaps those that you don't spend time face to face with, but you actually did want to see how they were getting on. And working as well. I mean, it has revolutionised the business diary somewhat, where you can
and I think there's
back meetings.
As you'd appreciate, part of our job as analysts is that we're always looking to the future, and we're looking at what's coming and trying to help telecom service providers and businesses to understand what this means for them and what they should do about it. So we're there to try to help them to navigate change effectively. And undoubtedly, the pandemic has really changed the working world and the way people are living as well. And if you think about just the UK alone, you see millions of people all of a sudden en masse working at home, and a lot of them very reluctant to go back to working in a centralised fashion. And a lot of businesses also saying now that this distributed mode of working is something that they're going to support long term because it's what their employees actually want. And, I think although home working isn't a new thing, it's been going on for, 20 years plus. What we have seen is that a lot of the myths around home working, that people will just be, sitting there playing with the children, watching TV and not actually working, have proven not to be true. People have actually been very productive. They've adapted to working at home, and it means they can avoid that, thankless commute into the office every single day. And yes, there are challenges with adopting a home working mode of working, but most of them can be overcome. And, we're all sort of learning our way. Those of us that worked at home for a long period of time, I've worked at home for about 16 years, and we're old hands at this. We know that there is a transition process, but there are solutions to, a lot of the problems that have come up. And this has led, this whole sort of thought process led to us at Omnisperience rolling out a new concept, which is the smart life space. And what we're saying is that, a lot of companies are traditionally sold into households, and that households are now not just, a place where you sleep and, you might talk to your granny on the phone or something. They are a place where people are living, working and playing, and the market has really, really changed. So those houses have now got lots of IoT devices sort of, cropping up in them. They're also where we're working. We're not just working from home as in working from a larger business. We might be running lots of little businesses from home. A lot of people have got side gigs these days. And there's lots of other services that we might now need within the home that certainly wasn't the case 20 years ago. So it's creating this enormous opportunity for innovation and, for companies to come in and address this new way of living and working that we've all entered into, and that the pandemic has sort of accelerated.
Yeah, absolutely. So from your perspective, you've talked a lot about the future, about innovation, and obviously that's what we're all about, isn't it, at the Tech Trailblazers, looking at what's coming down the pipe from a mobile perspective. What do you look for when you're judging entries?
Well, it's hard to give you a recipe, but I've got some hints and tips, because I tend to sort of think quite laterally. So sometimes, you'll see the perfect piece of technology at the perfect time, and in my day job, this is the case as well. Sometimes you see the perfect piece of technology that's ahead of its time, and that can be quite frustrating, because you know that this is something very, very innovative, but the market might not be quite ready for it. And sometimes you see a really interesting piece of technology where the people that have built it just don't really understand what the market is for that piece of technology. They built it because they're technologists and they love technology and haven't really thought about the commercial aspects, what it's suitable for, or they may even think they know what it's suitable for, but actually there's a bigger opportunity to the side that they've completely ignored. So a lot of my day job is about helping people to understand what they've got, what the potential is, and what they need to do with it. When it comes to something like an awards, I think my first point would be to say that, when you're writing a submission, you have to think of the judges. So we've got lots and lots of entries to read, and you obviously want your entry to stand out so that you can sell it to us. So the first thing is get to the point. We see a lot of entries and they might be quite long-winded or wind about, and they don't actually get to the point and say what's really special about what they have. And that can take quite a bit of work. All of us can write a couple of pages on what we've got or on our pet topic, but to actually then go and distill that into a paragraph is quite a hard thing to do, but it's a really important exercise. And when you've done it, what you should do is then go and find some random person in your office or someone that's got nothing to do with what you're doing and get them to read it and tell you whether they understand it or not. Because sometimes we get so into what we're doing, we're not seeing it and explaining it in a way that outsiders can really understand. So I think there's an exercise that people need to go through in terms of, explaining succinctly what they do, which will help those long-suffering judges who've got lots and lots of things that they need to read. Always get it proofread, always go through and make sure that, the English is right, because we're not going to be impressed if the thing is written in really bad English and, hasn't got any full stops and commas in the right places and stuff like this. And you might think that's a really basic thing to say, Rose, but, we do see quite a lot of submissions that are just very badly written. I'm a great advocate for the highlighter pen method, maybe because I'm old. I would really recommend that you print out your entry, get a highlighter pen and go over it and say, what are the really important points here that I want to stand out? and then look at it again and say, and are they standing out? Have I made the most of these points? Have I written it in a way that these points are really pinging off the page? Do I need to do another rewrite? I think that if you make an assertion, if you start to talk about your market, for example, back those up with data. I mean, we live in the data age, but there is nothing worse than reading an entry that is just reading like marketing speak with lots of spin in it and no facts. Because believe me, we get entries where, they've really done their research, that every point is backed up, and those are always going to sort of stand out and, be taken more seriously. And one is that's just full of fancy words and marketing speak. As much as your marketing department might think they've done a good job, we're not here to judge your marketing. We're here to judge, your products and your proposition. I think as well, enthusiasm and passion always really stand out. So when somebody, really understands why, if you've got a founder who really understands why they're doing this, that really does stand out more than if you've given it to some marketer and they've written it, but perhaps they didn't really grasp what it was all about, or they didn't have the passion of the founder. So I think having that focus that you get from a founder is actually quite important as well, in a submission. And beyond that, what I'm looking for is something that's just practical. I mean, you often get things that are great technology that you have to really think about, well, who would buy this and why? There's a big common sense thing to this. If you haven't explained in words of one syllable to me, why someone would want to buy this, and I'm going to have to try and figure that out, and I'm going to use my common sense to do that. And so I want to see a piece of technology, that I can say, yeah, there's a really big need for that in the market. I get it. And if your product is something that's a bit more complex and perhaps, a bit more technical and harder to get, and you really have to work hard to explain to me, who's going to buy it and why, for it to stand out.
So obviously this year we're closing relatively soon. So I think 25th of September. Are you looking for anything in particular? I mean, do you think things like the pandemic are going to be rising to the top as drivers for a lot of the new technology, or do you think there are other factors in play?
I think if the awards that come in are just application about social distancing, I think that would be quite boring. I think there are some things that, that the pandemic will have accelerated that could be very interesting. So, the whole working from home piece, as I said earlier, I think there's some very interesting applications around that. And I would really like to see them. I think they're very saleable, because I don't think people are going to go back to 5 days a week working in a centralised office. I think there's a massive market just opened up there, and people that get into that market, soon, I think there's a big opportunity for them. And I think what the pandemic has also done is put new wings on some technologies that looked like they were promising for a very long time, but really didn't take off. So, we're actually recording this podcast over Zoom, and video conferencing would be a great example of that, where we were all really enthusiastic about it, thought it was a good idea, and it's been very slow to sort of take off over a long period of time. But, people have really been educated during the pandemic about the value of video conferencing. And, and now that's a market that's booming again. I think that a lot of things to do with, the smart home will be interesting to see as well. If those are applications, we're going to see some interesting use cases from those. One of the most frustrating things, I don't know about you, Rose, that I find about the smart home though, is that we get very excited about, having an internet connected kettle or an internet connected light. But these things break a lot. And I'd be really interested to see something that helps me manage them better. And, to assure that those objects are actually working in the way that I would want them to. So I'm quite interested in seeing that, I think, as well.
that might be a little bit more on the Glomo side of things. I'm struggling to see how we would get that into an enterprise tech environment. But I think there'll be an awful lot of that type of stuff happening. It is interesting the way that we can't say her name because she'll start asking us questions. But it is funny when you're on a Zoom call and everybody starts telling their a lady to do something, and then 5 voices pop up going, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that."
And our digital assistant is everywhere now. It's in every room, and I think from the security side of the awards, it's brought up some really interesting scenarios as well, and those kind of applications are really interesting at the moment, which is how we assure and how we secure our smart home. And one of the challenges that it's brought is that everybody working at home, we might have secured our offices very, very well, but all of a sudden our perimeters have just disappeared, and our workforce is at home, and not just at home. We've got this work anywhere sort of scenario that's come to the fore, which is working in coffee shops or train stations or wherever. When we finally get sick of working within 4 walls at home, we want to change a space and we want to go there, and that brings up a whole load of new security nightmares that businesses are going to have to try and tackle. So it's a lot of new challenges as a result of the changes brought about by the pandemic, and it'd be really interesting to see some solutions to that, I think.
Yeah, well, I know the CISOs have probably enjoyed working from home, but it must be very hard when you're used to having effectively a fortress to protect. Well, now, everything's out in the wild. So
and we're on consumer broadband, and we're using consumer security packages, and we're using consumer mobiles, and we're using, there's all the consumer IoT and those so-called smart objects that aren't really that smart from a security point of view. There's a lot of vulnerabilities there, and and changes to the way we're working. And we're talking really about the UK now, but we've got to remember that the world has basically started working from home, and which brings in lots and lots of challenges. I did a teleconference with a contact from Israel, and they were sitting outside in the sunshine. You can hear all the birds singing. It was really quite idyllic, and when people do that and we're in the winter or it's raining here in the UK, that's quite it makes us quite jealous, I suppose. But it just shows that the workplace has really turned inside out, and it's wherever your workers are now. And there's also a lot more temporary workers and gig economy workers. Not everybody's employed, and that brings in a whole load of challenges as well, I think. And from a mobile point of view, we're sort of very much more mobile. And as I said, we've got things like, 5G just rolling out, and lots of unknowns around that. I mean, it's a great platform for innovation, and we want to see some innovation happening, but we're really just at the cutting edge of that at the moment, particularly in the UK. So it'll be interesting to see over the next few years how that enables and provides a platform for innovation in the mobile space.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very interesting what you're saying about the the contacts everywhere, and you're getting to see people in their most times home environments, which I find fascinating. It's a bit like the business version of Gogglebox.
It is. You do certainly see a different side to people, I think, Rose, don't you? But I think there's been a humanisation gone on, which is very interesting when you contrast it with what's happening in the technology world, because what we're seeing is a lot of automation and AI coming into the market. Everything seems to be AI enabled at the moment.
Absolutely. We're seeing already a lot of entries in that, either with a slant of that or focused on that.
And I think, these are brilliant things, and, it's great, to have automation, and automation, can do some fantastic things for us. You can over-automate, and you can have what I call bad automation. So sometimes, people want to talk to another person, often because their query is very complex. And if they're sort of, forced just to deal with some automated process that doesn't accommodate that, then it can be extremely frustrating. I think there are limitations to artificial intelligence still that, I mean, it's getting cleverer and cleverer every year, but there are certain things that it doesn't do very well. It doesn't do empathy. It doesn't adjust to very complex scenarios, because at the end of the day, somebody has to train it and set up the rules, at least at the moment, as to what the AI can handle. So we still need human beings in the process. And I think the key is to blend the human, the AI and automation. And then, then you really are cooking on gas. I think the humans add some kind of secret sauce still. And I think that what businesses really need to do is get the technology to do the heavy lifting and save the humans where they add the value, where they add that human face to the experience, rather than expecting poor processes to be compensated for or sort of integrated by means of a human having to do it. Those kind of things should all really be handled by technology and the person just there to deal with the things that they're best at doing.
Oh, yeah, I know I did have an experience with a mobile provider who had a WhatsApp group for customer contact, which was fine, as long as you stayed within the parameters that they wanted you to stay in, which they were geared up for. As soon as you went off-piste, it just got a bit ridiculous. But that said, they did bring it back because the guy actually phoned me up. So there was somebody else. There was an automated element to it, and then it kind of then kicked into a human being. So it was kind of a hybrid, and maybe that's really what we need, isn't it? As you say, get some of the stuff that can be automated very effectively for efficiency's sake, and then bring in the human touch when you need it.
Yeah, and I think mobilisation as well. So most people are accessing things now from their mobiles, and not all applications work great on mobile. And so one of the sort of half-step challenges is to really get that mobile experience, because, I mean, we're talking as ladies of a certain age, and I'm sure your audience will comprise of a lot of people of a certain age as well that has some history in the tech industry. But we're also building for, non-techies, for the elderly people who, for most of their lives, this technology didn't exist and they're having to adjust to it.
Yeah.
And we're building at the other end of the scale, people who've never known anything but the mobile platform and can't imagine life behind it and believe it's a human right to have a mobile with connectivity. So when you think of the sheer scope of customers that we have now, it's quite mind-boggling. And actually democratizing technology, making it available to wider and wider groups of people, making it work very easily, I think is exciting. And I think it's one of the next biggest challenges for this decade. So that the maximum number of people can use it and can enjoy it and can benefit from it. And the experience can still be very clunky. So anything that really, you don't have to invent the most, sort of advanced technology for it to be impressive. Sometimes you're just making something that already exists work much, much better. And that is an innovation in itself. And we must remember that, when we look back at the last 10 years, we think about the likes of Apple, who didn't really invent a lot of technology, but what they did was they made technology work better for ordinary people. I mean, when they came into the market, you were still getting a smartphone arriving. Well, they weren't even smartphones, they were feature phones at that point. You were still getting a phone arriving without it being charged. And rather than having that lovely unboxing experience and being able to use your lovely new toy, you had to go and plug it in for a few hours before you could actually use it. And just really,
I remember it being 24 hours. It was like it was a whole day.
And Steve Jobs realizing that was not a satisfactory experience, and just sending out the phones with charged batteries so that people could use them straight away. Thinking about how people use mobile and actually just making it work in a way that was easier and more fun and just worked more logically, that you didn't need to have some sort of PhD in IT in order to be able to use these devices. It was a revelation. And, the last 10 years has really been, sort of fueled by that. But we're not there yet. There's still a lot of things that need to happen to create a more enjoyable mobile experience. And so applications that deliver that, I think, are very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we've talked about the technology element of it, and you said yourself that you've been inside a startup in the dot-com sort of bubble time, and obviously you've spoken to lots and lots and lots of startups in all of their various phases, both from sort of probably conceptual through to pre-IPO and post-IPO and pre-exit to a sale to a large vendor.
Yeah.
What would you say are your tips to them at the moment? Because I think we're seeing an awful lot of, over and above the challenges that you face in a startup environment anyway, things are incredibly tough at the moment for many people. As you say, remote workers, dispersed teams, the economic climate, and, as we all sort of head into recession as it appears. What would you say are some key points that you've picked up along the way that may be helpful?
So if you're a startup and you're looking to grow at the moment, I think there's a good market out there for you. And I think what we've seen a lot of in recent years is what I would call the outsourcing of innovation. So a lot of large companies don't do as much internal innovation as they used to do. They don't have the time. Innovation is quite a risky thing to do. So they prefer to go out and consume startups because then they know what they're buying. So, I think it's kind of interesting in a way if you sort of think about this sideways, and you sometimes get a founder who they see their product and their company as their baby, and they have a very personal relationship with it. And so I would counsel you to have a passion for it, and not to start to see it as your child, as your offspring, because at the end of the day, this is all about business. And, you wanting to take investment on board. So you need to share ownership of that product. Eventually you're going to want to sell it. And some founders find it very hard to let go because they've invested so much of themselves into it. They find it hard to take advice. They find it hard to admit that they might not be the best person to grow the business to the next stage. So I think right from the start, you need to have a very practical view that this is a good idea that you have had and that you are building, but your objective is to sell this successfully and make a lot of money so that you can then live the life that you want to live. And that might include another startup. You might take the money that you have, and we see this quite often where you have serial entrepreneurship where someone will have a successful first exit and then will either become an investor in other startups or they will go on and found another startup. Often it's the second or third startup where, they've learned along the way and they have a much, much bigger exit, the second or third time around. But I think be practical. Realise that this is an idea that you are guiding through these different stages, that you need external advice sometimes. You need to be outside the echo chamber. So everybody internally might be telling you this idea is great and everything's fantastic. And sometimes you need someone to come from outside and tell you what's wrong. And I would say that I would call myself a constructive cynic, Rose, because I have to tell a lot of people that their babies are ugly. So they all love their babies. They all love their products. They all think that their product is beautiful. And I have to come in and to pick spots and tell them what's wrong with it and how they need to change it. I try to do that in a constructive way because I'm mindful of the fact that at the end of the day, what these people are putting their blood, sweat and tears into this startup, and what they deserve to get is a successful exit, which leaves them financially sound. So to do that, we have to really look at this in the cold light of day and say, is this something that people will buy? And if not, why not? And how do we improve it? And how do we make it more saleable? So I guess that's my biggest piece of advice is be realistic, have a little bit of emotional separation, as hard as that can be sometimes, because I do want you to be passionate about your product, but you do have to have a little bit of, it's a bit like that teenage stage, I suppose, where you're sort of separating slightly from your baby, aren't you? And letting it stand on its own 2 feet. And you have to do that with a product as well.
Yeah, no. Well, I know how that one's going because I've got a teenager and you've got yours of similar age. So I think we're living that one right now.
Yeah, and it can be very difficult. And I think people underestimate the emotional impact of building a company because you do put your life and soul into it. And, you have to have a passion for what you're doing to actually put yourself through this amount of pain. And, as judges, I'm very aware of that. But on the other hand, there is no point in going down a rabbit hole. You do need to be creating something that you can extract value out of, that somebody else is prepared to invest in or to buy from you. So it is really important to sometimes stop and get that external perspective. Are we doing this right? Is there something we're missing? What would ordinary people think of this? Where would our market be? Someone that will ask the right questions and give you a different, honest perspective. And by the way, that isn't an easy thing to do either. It's very hard to go into a room full of people, all of whom absolutely passionately love what they're doing, and then to say, excuse me, I have a problem with what you're doing because, and this is why, and this is what I think you should do about it. So, I think, please respect us as well when we pick spots. You should really challenge us and say, you've told us what's wrong with our product, but, do you have an answer as to how we could improve it? That is a comeback that you could have on us and have an expectation to do that. But I think you do have to see the value as well. When you enter an award scheme like this, one of the really valuable things you're getting back from it, hopefully, is some feedback and some validation and some hints and tips for improvement, which should be very valuable to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to round up, I think this is something that we've talked about, you and I, in the past, and obviously has become more and more of a topic in the business world that we both operate in, is around the diversity in the world of IT and in technology. What do you see that would be able to help facilitate that and bring that forward?
I think in the tech world, we don't really have a problem in terms of ethnic diversity, at least in mobile, because the whole world is involved in this. I mean, the amount of innovation I'm seeing coming out of markets like Africa is just unbelievable. And, Asia is so far ahead, pushing technology, extremely IT literate people there. So I really work in a globalized market. So we don't have a problem with ethnic diversity. The industry by nature is ethnically diverse. Everybody is engaged in it. And the barriers to entry have decreased, are very modest nowadays. So young people can pick up the tools and start to build something pretty easily.
Yeah.
I think where we do have a problem is getting more women involved in the industry. And technology, even today, tends to be something that is seen as a male preserve. And I am somewhat disappointed by the numbers of women that we see in the industry today. It varies according to the market. So you can go to some markets where there are relatively more women, but it's certainly not 50-50. And there are a number of reasons, I think, why women are not entering the industry in the volume that we would like to see. And I don't think it's because the tech industry is making it difficult. I think they have got arms open, waiting to embrace women into the industry if they choose to join it. There's a shortage of many skill sets, and they would be happy to take anybody or anything to fill some of these jobs. Because they're absolutely
that level of diversity.
Yeah, they're absolutely desperate to get people into some of these jobs and go out and market, to young people to come into the industry. And we do a lot of work in terms of mid career as well, trying to get people who've maybe hit a sort of wall with their career and are bored, and to give them the skills to come into the industry as well. So we're actually quite good at doing that. But I think it starts before they hit our industry in schools, that people get into a mindset, women get into a mindset that the technology industry is not for them. And I certainly go out, and a lot of other women do, a lot of companies do, into schools. And I do try to break down this perception and explain that, you know, whoever you are, whatever your interests are, there is a role for you in technology. Whether you just want to become a multi-billionaire, well, your chance of doing that in our industry is probably better than in most. Whether you want to travel the world and you just love, you know, working with people from all over the world, it's a great industry for that. Whether you want to do good, because our industry does an awful lot of good, both because we give money altruistically, but also because the tools that we're building are actually really helping, you know, to do a lot of good in the world, whether that's helping people to, you know, sort of work their own way out of poverty and to give people the tools so they can do that, or whether it's, you know, helping the environment even. You know, we've got a good track record on, you know, we're moving to renewables en masse. We substitute for all that commuting, so we're helping there. You know, there's lots of things that we do that help the environment as well in this industry. So I go through lots of different motivations and explain that, you know, you don't have to be a coder to work in technology. I mean, there's so many other jobs in this industry. And it's trying to get those young people at a certain age and open their eyes and get them to understand that, you know, if you're neurodiverse, you know, if you're, for example, on the autistic spectrum, that, you know, we embrace you. There's lots and lots of roles that people like that are brilliant at, you know, working within our industry that require people to concentrate on detail. And to be fanatical about detail. And, you know, we have a lot of people that are neurodiverse within our industry. So I think it's really about perception. I think we do sometimes encounter sexism within the industry, but I must say in my career, that's been, you know, very rare. I think most of the men that work in the industry that I've encountered, you know, would like to see a lot more women. And I think women bring a perspective that our industry vitally needs. I've seen so many male-led startups that have come up with technology that is just not viable. I'll give you an example. I wrote about this a couple of years ago. There was a hilarious example, Rose, of an internet-connected bra that somebody had come up with, a man had come up with. And his idea...
He did one not.
Well, I pointed out to him that as a woman, I really couldn't see a market for it. And he would look very mystified. And the reason is because, you know, obviously it'd have to be certified as a medical device because it's so close to your body, you know, and you'd have to really make sure it was safe. Also, the idea behind it, which was, you know, he was trying to do good, which was women can sometimes get into very difficult situations, you know, and in some countries, you know, be high risk of being sexually assaulted. And he thought,
oh, right, so it was a personal safety device rather than just a...
Yes, but I pointed out to him that by, you know, that you could be sexually assaulted without them actually touching the bra, and that, you know, I was slightly worried that it might be sending messages to the police while you were legitimately engaging in something frisky, and that would be quite embarrassing. So there were a whole load of reasons why this thing wouldn't work, not least because he hadn't thought about whether it was watchable or not. And, you know, so I think women can bring a sort of perspective. Another example would be the internet-connected hairbrush, which was going to cost about $150. And I just didn't believe that there were very many women that would want to go and pay $150 just to be told whether they were brushing their hair right or not. So, you know, we can bring in some sort of practical, cynical eye, which can stop you going down that rabbit hole and developing something that really there isn't a market for. And, you know, to help guide you in a direction where there is something that, you know, there is some money and you can use your talents to better effect, I think.
Well, yes, I don't think those two were really viable, but they have brightened things up in my world anyway.
We have a collection called The Internet of Silly Things, and I think because there aren't enough women in the IoT world, I think we do see this. You know, these silly things. Just because you can connect it to the internet doesn't mean to say that you should. And sometimes you need someone to tell you that at an early stage before you've invested too much money, time and effort in producing something that there isn't actually a market for. But there are so many things that it would be cool to connect to the internet. So put your talents to good use to something that, will really enhance people's lives and more importantly, that people are prepared to pay for. Because we're not in a charity business here. If there isn't a group of people that will pay hard cash for your products, then you don't really have something that's commercially viable, do you? So somebody has to be prepared to part with their hard-earned cash for your concept for it to be commercially viable.
Yeah, and even more so in the commercial world now, where people are finding that budgets are going to be, even more scrutinised than they were previously.
Those substitution applications would be interesting in this current market. So if you've got something that will help somebody save a little, they spend a bit of money on whatever it is that you're doing to save a little bit of money somewhere else, then I think that would have legs on at the moment, because people, I think from the autumn, from now onwards, as the furlough schemes disappear and the short time working ceases and people start to run out of credit, I think you are going to find large sectors of the community which are cash constrained, and therefore anything that's actually going to help save a bit of money for those people, I think would be of interest. Environmental things, as I said last year, we were talking about the environment quite a lot. It hasn't really gone away. It's a little bit quieter profile after COVID, but we're still looking at how we can do things that have a positive environmental impact, I think. And a lot of big companies we must remember, have got environmental goals built into their business models now. So things like applications that can help save power, or we've talked about the fact that a lot of home working technology substitutes for commuting, or those big centralised offices, which are very power hungry places. All those kind of things are very interesting. I think the other thing that we know is true is that we have an ageing population in a lot of countries. So applications that support healthcare, support people being able to live longer in their own homes safely. All those kind of things are very, very interesting applications at the moment with our ageing population. And we touched on earlier that there are some parts of the employment market where there are really big shortages in terms of skill set. So anything that helps us able to find these in-demand skills or automate some of that stuff, to fill that gap, I think, are interesting. There's just so much out there. I mean, I've got quite an eclectic taste when it comes to technology, Rose. So I'm hoping to see something that makes me sit up and say, well, I didn't think of that, but actually it's really obvious. When you find an application where you think that's really obvious, why didn't somebody think of that before? You're onto a winner, because, it's already got a market. It's just that nobody had noticed the gap. So I'm hoping to see one of those this time around.
Fabulous. And is there anything else that you'd like to share, perhaps about you, or obviously we know about the knitting now, so the internet of knitting, that you think would be good to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think one of the things, again, that I have, that I'm a woman, so I have a different perspective on technology than perhaps the majority of male analysts do. I also live in the countryside. I live out of a main city, and I find that a lot of analysts, a lot of technologists tend to live in tech hubs, or they live in big cities. I think when you come out into the countryside and you see ordinary people, everyday people, and their experience of technology, that gives you another perspective on the technology world. I think if you live in California, for example, in Silicon Valley, or even the Silicon Roundabout in London and all these other tech hubs, you're surrounded by other technology enthusiasts, people that are very educated about technology, and that have access to fantastic bandwidth. And I think you have a very different perspective than when you live outside in the countryside, in a place where, you're bandwidth constrained and the majority of people aren't very technology literate. And that's our mass market. Those are the people who we have to convince to use our technology. So I think sometimes it's really good to get outside our own bubble and to sort of look at it from the perspective of other people, whether that's older people, younger people, people of a different sex or a different culture, and get as many perspectives on what you're doing as possible.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Teresa. It's always a pleasure to catch up. And yeah, some great insights there, some great things that I'd not heard of before. This is what it's all about. And we love having you involved because you bring your own enthusiasm and passion for the world of startups in the mobile world and in IoT. So thank you again for joining us on the Judges on Fire podcast from the Tech Trailblazers.
Thank you very much for having me, Rose.
Yeah, fantastic. And for our listeners, you can review what we've been talking about. We'd love your feedback. You can listen, obviously, to other podcasts, both on the Founders on Fire, where we speak to the winners, and also to other judges. And also follow us on social at Tech Trailblaze on Twitter, and you can find us as Tech Trailblazers on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.